Hey guys, I am just going to wait for confirmation that you can hear me and then we will jump in. So if someone could just let me know if you hear me, that would be fantastic. Testing 1, 2, 3. I have fuzz on my shirt. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, great. All right. So welcome to another live Q&A. A few ground rules. It's best if you mark your question with the word question in all caps. Also best to keep your question relatively short. You don't want to write a whole paragraph. Just kind of get right to the question because unless I know you really well, I read the questions ahead of time just to make sure they're not too out there or too intrusive. And I go in chronological order. So I'll start at the beginning and we'll just get through as many questions as we can. What else? My daughter is going to be coming at some point and dropping off her dog for me to puppy sit. So there might be a little bit of commotion, but nothing that should be a big deal. And I'm also going to open up some of the FOIA docs that I frequently reference, just so I have those up. Let's see here. Redacted. Okay, I'll open up the Gilbert. I mostly use the Gilbert and the Chandler, but I'm also going to open up my timeline, and because I use that quite a bit too. Okay. All right. Let me start with the questions. Oh, and if one of my mods wants to drop in a link to the petition to open an investigation into my brother Joe's death, I would be most grateful. Okay. Let's see. Aunt B asked, do you think Zulema made up the Alex Tarp story thinking she wished she had one for the mess at his murder? I absolutely think that that story was completely contrived. I do not believe most of what comes out of any of these what I would call co-conspirators allegedly. It's not even alleged. Is my opinion that some of these women, such as Melanie, and Zulema, are co-conspirators, that their involvement is supported in the FOIA docs. But personally, I believe that that story was an attempt to secure pity from investigators and try to rewrite the narrative as like, whoa, I narrowly escaped being a victim myself. Melanie Gibb did the same thing. So yeah, my opinion. And besides that, like, she knows that this guy is, I believe she knew all along. And she was also one of the ones who really kicked all of this off by telling Lori back in, I think it was May of 2019, maybe, that God showed her that some of her family members were going to die. And so, you know, they were part of all of this. We don't know the extent of anyone's involvement. But Zulema even stayed visited Rexburg in between Tylee and JJ's murder. I found that out from the FOIA docs. So, she's like in this up to her elbows. So for her to even, for Alex to even suggest, like, hey, how about I put this tarp down and give you a sexy massage? Because what says sexy quite like getting a massage on a tarp on a bed? Like, it's just so, these people are not sophisticated liars. They just say the most outrageous things, but a lot of times their lies are, or well, their claims, I should say, are just accepted carte blanche as fact. But yeah, I don't. Okay. Okay. That question wasn't a question. Prince Charming's mom asked if I think Lori and Chad will take the stand. No, I don't think so. I think both of their attorneys will strongly encourage them not to do that. Senga asked, do you think this case may lead to legal changes when cult-like behavior is reported? Well, it's not a crime to be a weirdo, so I mean, people can join cults, participate in cults, and as long as they don't break the law, there's no harm, no foul, except to their family members and the cult members themselves. But I do, and this is pretty pie in the sky, but if I had my druthers, there would be changes nationwide to reporting laws. I really, really hope that this case will shine a penetrating light on this issue of why are some people not required reporters, such as family members. So yeah, I think any adult, any sentient adult who knows of abuse or that children are in danger should be required to report, and they should be held accountable if they do not report. Prince Charming's mom also asked, oh, she's coming in hot. Is Zulema's limited immunity for AZ only? That's my impression. Well, no, because that's a good question. Because I think it extends to Idaho. I do know. I'm trying to remember now what was like shared in confidence and what is public information out there. So I'm going to tread very lightly on this, but I do think that Special Prosecutor Rob Wood had some involvement in it. So I'm not sure, but I strongly suspect it carries over to Idaho. Jen Chapman, welcome. Hi, yourself. Wow, I finally caught a live. Yes. Oh, yeah. So I'm moving these lives to 2 hours earlier because I'm usually getting ready for bed around 9, and so like I was just like running on fumes in the lives and wasn't my freshest. So it's unfortunate for people on the Pacific time because this is like 5 p.m. But yeah. Do you think all the enablers / co-conspirators will ever be acknowledged as lawbreakers, either by their actions, inactions, or silence? Personally, no. There just doesn't seem to be an appetite for going after the co-conspirators. The most that we've even seen is like a reference in the indictments against Chad and Lori that came out of Idaho, to like possible co-conspirators, known and not yet known, or something. But I will be pleasantly surprised, but I'm not holding my breath. Myrna asked, okay. Do you think the children were buried in shallow graves because they were going to be uh, moved soon? I think the two was a typo. So I suspect that Chad and possibly whoever helped him decimate Tylee's remains, underestimated how much it takes to incinerate remains. So I suspect that his plan was for her remains to be incinerated. With JJ, I'm not sure that he planned to move him until he filed, I think it was a permit to install a trailer on his property. I remember when that news came out in 2020. I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, the kids' remains are on his property, because, and that's not just like, rewriting history in hindsight. There was a lot of discussion around that in the Facebook group I was in at the time. But so I honestly, I think that Chad was just really lazy and just really chaotic. And I think he thought that by, obfuscating the scent, I think he took measures, like just enough measures to be able to hide the scent from animals, to prevent animals from digging up JJ, especially JJ's remains, but also Tylee's. But yeah, so I suspect that the whole purpose for the trailer was to move their remains and throw down some cement and install the trailer. But I just don't, maybe we'll find out at the trial, but it just doesn't, it seems like he was just really lazy. Like, I thought it was fascinating that I think it was Detective Hermosillo, when he testified in Chad's preliminary hearing, or it might have been one of the FBI agents, but they talked about how the grass around the like on top of where they ultimately found JJ's remains was a different type and a different height than the grass surrounding it. And I'm just like, you have two kids' remains buried on your property, and the Jeep was confiscated. So I've already made this point quite a few times now that I cannot believe they didn't take off sooner. The Jeep was confiscated, I think it was like December 4th or 5th, something like that. And Lori and, no, I'm sorry, November 4th or 5th, somewhere around there, because Lori and Chad were getting married in Hawaii. And so, like, no one called Rexburg police to ask why they took the Jeep, and no one took off. But that would have at least been enough of a heads up for like Chad to kind of tidy things up. But no, he didn't even mow the grass, so who knows? Sometimes the chat like bounces to the most current. So if I miss a question, that is most likely why. Oh, great, Marion. I'm glad this time works. The Bethy Boop asked, "Do you think Pryor will find a controversial juror who was on grand jury for Chad's indictment?" I don't think someone on the grand jury could be on the jury. Um, so no, I suspect he'll be like one of those attorneys who just goes through jurors by the dozen. I imagine he will be, yeah, quite picky and even somewhat capricious. I love all the hi from Scotland. Oh wow. But yeah, I see you all. Okay, Buffy. She asked, "Do you think there is some significance to the scissors Zulema talks about in her interview? Law enforcement seemed to be sparked by her mention of Lori giving her those scissors." Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the impression I just really don't know, but the impression I got from Zulema's interview is that like she just came across as really paranoid, like not as like skitsy paranoid as Melanie Gibb was in that last interview with Rexburg police, but it just seemed like Zulema just kind of kept brushing along different topics in the event that like law enforcement knew more than they did about the relevance of that particular topic. So yeah, excuse me. I found the scissors detail really weird. The scissors, the tarp, and from the other one, the like the gift basket, the bag of money. She is just so full of weird, random details, and I think in some ways she has some of Lori's tendencies to kind of tell on herself because these things are sorry, bump the mic. These things are like running through her head, and like someone who has nothing to hide, they're going to be pretty relaxed, but someone who has a lot to hide, they're going to be like, it'll be like this push me pull you, because they don't know quite how to get in front of something enough to placate investigators so they don't dig deeper into that particular topic. But yeah, so I don't know. It was weird. Yeah, Buffy said, "Yay, Yorkie heaven!" Yeah, my daughter has a Yorkie, or as we call him, a New Yorkie. Thanks, Connie. I told you, Zulu. They're awesome. Um, except I left one of my new frames on the subway. All right, they fell out of my bag. I'll have to reorder them. Okay. Oh, thanks for the link, Buffy. Yeah, Mom de Plume also asked, didn't she also hide her wedding ring at that interview? Yes, she had some kind of ring that she took off, and I think she like put it under her leg or something. It was weird. Oh, okay. So Glamis Girl asked, why do you think Charles entered the home when he knew Lori might be violent and he knew Alex was in there? And love your glasses. Thank you. Um, and thank you for your kind words. So, yeah, I've talked about this before. but I never operate under the assumption, or I really, really try not to operate under the assumption that someone attending a live has been to previous lives. I, I've questioned this same thing myself, because just a couple weeks prior, they were going at each other in an argument over text, and Lori replied to Charles like something like "okay" or whatever, Joe Ryan. And when I read that, it just like sent a chill down my back, because I thought, I think Charles knew exactly what that meant. Maybe not like the full implications, but that was a shot across the bow. But I just think that there's just not as much education for men as there is for women who are dealing with domestic abuse. And so, I mean, typically in a situation like this, you would agree to meet up in a public place. But it seems like no one told Charles that, or maybe he underestimated the threat. Maybe he thought he was just going to, walk in, get JJ, and walk out. But yeah, it's really, really unfortunate, because with all of those escalating tensions, at absolute minimum, he should have had someone like Adam go with him. But they, obviously hindsight is 2020, but typically in those situations, the recommendation is to meet up in a public place, and that would have saved Charles' life, at least for the meantime. But I think Lori was pretty resolute on having him murdered. So, it might have just bought him some time, or given him at least enough time to make it back to Houston, where he was much safer. Yeah, the Bethy Boop said Zulema was praising God when Tammy died, so Lori and Chad could be married. Yes, that is absolutely true. Her um, in her text messages with, I think it was with Chad. Let me see if I have if if I have a screenshot of that, and if I can find it quickly, because it it was really bizarre. Mm, yeah, she also said about Charles. Uh, yeah, both she and Chad, they had a conversation about Charles' death, uh, and Chad had said, "It's crazy about Charles, but such a relief." And then Zulema replied, "Big relief that he's gone." Oh, it says, yes, she said, yes, the Charles thing feels surreal, still progressing that. I think she meant processing that. Big relief that he's gone. I mean, so these people are really unbelievable. Um, let's see. Yeah, she also, said to Alex, um, that Chad looks way too happy. They were just like talking about just, how happy Chad is, that he and Lori were going to get to marry. This was just days, less than 2 weeks after Tammy's death. Um, yeah. Um, I think I have. I'll just check one more thing. If I can't find it, then I'll let it go. Yeah. Okay. I can't find it. I'll just check one other place. Okay. Oh, I think I might have found it. Well, I'll just read it here. Let me share my screen. Um, Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay, so Zulema said, "Hi Chad, I just saw your post. Now this is the day that Tammy died, so October 19th. I hope you are okay. Yesterday at the temple, I had a vision that I was helping a bride get ready and helping her with her white dress. Then I see your post today. The Lord is wonderful." Chad said, "Thank you, Zulema. I am hanging in there. Our family has received overwhelming support. Yes, changes are underway. We have all felt Tammy nearby. She is very happy and already very busy. Her work is underway. I'm happy for her." This is Zulema. "I'm also excited for what's next. I'm praying for you and your family. Much love and comfort to you all. I hope to see you soon." I mean, this was just no, this, yeah, this was just the afternoon of her death. I mean, so it's just crazy. Okay. Barbara Wheeler asked, let me see if that's, yeah. Do you think Melanie Pulaski will testify? I think she'll be called as a witness and will have to. But I think she will be very unuseful and she will lie, throughout her entire testimony. And I think she'll get away with it. She gets away with everything. Claire Gray asked, why is John Pryor so obsessed with discrediting the prosecutors? Because of how truly awful the deeds of Chad and Lori are. Much worse details to be brought into trial. Yeah, I mean, it is honestly just one of the more infuriating aspects to his, just really skeevy methodology, and there's a legal adage that basically the premise of it is, if you have the law on your side, pound the law. If you have the facts on your side, pound the facts. If you have neither the law nor facts on your side, pound the table. In other words, it's like, if you can't win, just start pounding the table. And that is essentially John Pryor's MO through every hearing. He just pounds the table, turns red, a la heat miser, and just like tries to coerce the judge and also like witnesses into agreeing with him by like, instead of asking questions, making statements and saying, you would agree with that, right? And so I think he's just a man child table pounder. I mean, there are times where he makes some incisive arguments, but I suspect at this point he's run out of money. And like the last hearing, he just seemed really unprepared. It just seemed like, for the most part, he was winging it. Like, if you watch the prosecutors and those from the prosecution team, they just have like their ducks in a row. and, they have their research, they have case law, and he comes in and just kind of sits back and just pounds and pounds and pounds the table. So I really felt like in this last hearing that I was at, for Chad, I think, not that it really matters what I think, but I think the judge did a really good job at reining him in. And one of my favorite parts was when Pryor, stood up and the judge just asked him to remain seated for the duration of the ride. And so, yeah, so I hate that he just keeps going after, Rob Wood and also now Rachel Smith. I think because Mark Means, it was just, in my opinion, so dopey. I always wondered if Pryor put him up to, going after Mark Means so that he could be the inevitable fall guy. And then when Means fell, then he kind of had to pick up the baton and and carry on. But I hate it. I we'll see what comes of it, but I just hate that this man, especially Rob Wood, has just been repeatedly pulled through the keyhole backwards. It's also part of the reason why, like, anyone who supports Summer, Shiflett, I cannot support her ever. I mean, I don't care what happens to her. What she did to Rob Wood was, in my opinion, absolutely despicable. It was on point for what the Cox family does. And yeah, so, and yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is a human being just trying to do his job. So anyway, yeah, I just hate that he's going through that. Kim Roseman asked, "Are there any updates on if the Daybell children still support Chad?" I'm sure they do. I, it's I've made this point before, but I suspect that Pryor put them up to that. I think it was 48 hours episode. Um, and I could be wrong about that. That's just my opinion. But that them doing that episode, like, man, if I had any relationship with them, I would have told them absolutely not. Like, it's not your responsibility to keep the needle out of your dad's arm. And it was shortly after that the FOIA docs came out, where we have the love story, and if you can even call it that, and all these details that just made it embarrassingly clear that yeah, there was nothing righteous about their dad's intentions in any of this. So yeah. Yeah. Glamis Girl asked, "Do you think Chad would have burned JJ as well?" No, I don't. I think that JJ and Tylee were treated very differently by design. And I might be one against the wind on this, but I don't think Lori would have allowed it. So clearly, she had, she had severed any maternal ties with JJ. When I was there, she expressed great affection for JJ. So yeah, but I think their treatment post mortem was a reflection of Lori's emotional barometer toward both of the kids. Okay. Yeah, Janice. Yeah, she said Tammy was already busy up in heaven working and very happy. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just disgusting. And he also claimed that she, I think, like appeared to him and uh, told him to marry Lori. I think he said that to someone. It's crazy. Laura Nelson, I'm not sure what you mean by your question. You asked, do you think Lori had already made contact with Julie / Chad before leaving Hawaii, setting up her grand arrival to the group? I think if I understand your question, I think you're talking about her trip to Hawaii after Joe died or was found. So I do suspect that Lori and Chad had contact before they met in person, like over email or something. Um, and there was a reference in the infamous Reddit email to Jason Mao giving Lori to Chad in the temple. So I think that that most likely would have been um, like remote. But yeah, I, I don't know that she had contact with him that early. I know that, well, according to Melanie Gibb, and this does seem believable because Lori met Jason in the temple, and Jason talks about that. In fact, let me see if I can pull that up because I don't think I've shared that yet, and it is quite bizarre. Like now, Jason tries to distance himself from Lori, um, but yeah, I have this down as the shorter version, so we'll see how short it is. And I will share my screen.
Also with us today is Lori. And Lori is so cool. Lori and I met in a very, very unique situation. And real quick, Lori, let's talk about that before we start because people don't even know who you are. Well, the people in the know who you are, but one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast is so that we can spread the light of knowledge and help people learn about who they are and find their gifts and draw closer to Christ. And what happened to you was pretty unique, and how we ended up in the same room together is even more unique. So can we start off with that?
Yeah. So this, I mean, yeah, he's fangirling over Lori so hard. But in the infamous Reddit email, it said that, oh, well, actually, let me mention something else. So I'm like trying, this is one of the things I actually really love about the open Q&As because they get me thinking about new questions. And so sometimes, well, no, all the time I'm processing on the fly. Like no one ever floats questions to me ahead of time, or none of these are planted or anything ridiculous like that. So they're all like in the moment. But Lori had emailed Jason after meeting him in the temple. So let me see if I Okay. I found it. So let me share my screen. All right. So in reviewing this text string, I was aware that Jason Mao was a former police officer with the Chandler Police Department and Phoenix Police Department. He is a motivational speaker with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who has spoken at an event in Arizona where Chad Daybell was also a guest speaker. Mal speaks of the warrior ethos and preparing yourself for the final days. I then did a keyword search using something and learned that it was something that introduced Lori to the Preparing a People group. Yeah, it was actually, yeah, that. Anyway, okay. So on October 1st, 2018, so this was a couple weeks before she says she met Melanie Gibb and a few weeks before she met Chad in person for the first time. So on, October 1st, Lori sent Jason Mal the following SMS message. Hi, Jason. This is Lori Vallow. We met in the Celestial Room on September 21st. I have read and really enjoyed two of your books since then. So, I mean, this was what, nine, no, 10 days? In 10 days, she read two of his books. So she's love bombing him. I just love Moroni so much. I'm not good at social media. So I was just going to give you my number and email so that if you feel inspired to put me into contact with some like-minded people, I would love that. Now, I do think it's very interesting that something was redacted here. So anyway, she said, I did talk to my bishop about having you come speak to our youth, and he said he would love that. And this is something that Lori seems to use to like hook some of these guys, even when she was in Houston and she brought Chad out on false pretense. It was like to speak to the youth at her youth group so that he had something that was believable to take to Tammy to give him reason to fly to Houston. And that was before Charles was murdered. And then Jason responded, Hi, Lori. Thank you for those kind words. I will pass your info along to a lady named Melanie Gibb, who is the point of contact for a lot of the stuff we do. Also, you and Nicole, I think her last name is Law, might want to check out this website, preparingapeople.com. There is a big expo in November in Mesa for like-minded people, and you all should come. Great speakers and events. And so that was on October 1st. And then I think she shared her testimony on, it was actually 1 year prior to Tammy's death, which I'm sure is coincidental. She shared her testimony about wanting to murder Joe just 18 days later. So, and then Melanie Gibb told Chandler police that she met Lori on October 4th. So she had this interaction with Jason Mao on October 1st. Then 3 days later, she meets Melanie Gibb. And then just 2 weeks later, she shared her testimony in Melanie's home. And a week later, she and Chad met for the first time in St. George. And that I actually believe that they met for the first time. I could be wrong, but it was Chad's ridiculous love story that kind of convinced me of that, because he really just seemed to be completely smitten by her. So, all right. Oh, and in the Reddit email, let me see if I can find that really quickly. I've referenced this a few times, and I actually brought it into a PDF to make it searchable. So let me share my screen again. Um, okay. So this had said that no, this was supposed to be, I think, a paragraph header. Like it had like these different headers throughout, but all the formatting was lost. But it said, in reference to Chad and Lori, they met technically September 23rd, 2019, through Jason Mao at the temple. Chad was told around that time by one of the three Nephites, Mathoni, I might be slaughtering that a special woman would come into his life November, that should have been 2018, uh, together at this point at the Mesa Preparing a People event time. So September 23rd. Now there's no like authentication of this, but it does seem to fit into the overall timeline that if Lori and Jason met on the 23rd, then she took time to read two of his books and then reached out to him October 1st. So I do find this detail of Jason, that Lori, that they met technically. That's what makes me wonder if perhaps they like used some kind of like, FaceTime or something like that, and had some kind of um, unsanctioned ceremony where Jason gave Lori to Chad. We'll find out. Hopefully. I hope we find out. But, Jason, I mean, he's dumb as a doornail. The guy cannot, a doorknob. Now who's dumb? The guy cannot like put together a coherent sentence. Like reading through his social media posts is quite painful. So the guy, he fits the mold in terms of these group members, but he was a police officer, and so I think he was much more careful about what he put into writing. So, when they did the podcast, he was like, "Oh, Lori is so cool," and talking about how people who are in the know who Lori is, but you know, he was, uh, wanting to broaden her tent pegs. But yeah, so he he's involved, but no. um but as far as having contact with Julie Rowe said she never met Lori. So, and I think once she connected with Chad, I think Chad was kind of building his own team, and then he distanced himself from Julie Rowe. But early on, you see Julie Rowe's influence with Lori, because Lori mentions him in that, I mean, her in that weirdo Hallelujah song that she sang. That's on Smule. Donna Shepard said, I heard Zulema has immunity. Is that right? Yes, limited use immunity. So if she's caught lying, then she forfeits that immunity. Terry asked, do you know if Pryor still owns Chad's house? As far as I know. Oh, this is a good question. Denny Lenny asked, do you think it was deliberate on Chad's part to go through Lori, say on the phone, instead of personally stating things to the cult ladies so he would have deniability in future crimes? I think possibly to some extent, but I think also he was genuinely more shy and unsure of himself. I love how the one podcaster, I can't think of her name off the top of my head, referred to Chad as a side hustle prophet or something like that. So I think he lacked confidence, and I think Lori also, kind of took the lead because she wanted to be envied by other people. I think that was always really important to Lori. So it's like, better to stay quiet and be thought a fool than to, talk and remove all doubt. So I just wonder if Lori was like, I'll be your mouthpiece. So, but I mean, I don't think that Chad was like, none of the rest of his behavior indicates someone who was trying to secure some deniability, because he put an embarrassing amount of information and information that implies culpability in text. Okay. Norla Vine asked, do you think Jason Mal dodged a proverbial bullet by passing Lori on to Melanie Gibb? Yeah. Yeah. And by just not putting much in text, as far as we know. We don't know how much they have, but I would imagine he was pretty careful about what he put in text messages. All right. More greetings. Lots of insulting comments about these douche canoes. Janice. Jason Mao, he's police guy. That is absolutely one of my favorite quotes. I will look and see. This is this doesn't further the case in any way, but it is hilarious. So I'm going to play it. Let me see. I think this is it. Oh. Share my screen.
Yes.
It will be a very one-sided story, so it's always good to kind of see what's going on.
That was very smart. Yeah, Jason's. Well, it was really cool because I was sitting there and coming out of her neighborhood after he conned me to go to the house, and I pulled over, by the pool, and then I see this guy that I know, just like
our good friend,
just like right in front of me on the side of the road, and I'm like, that looks like Jason. I'm like, hold on, that's Jason. He's a police guy. I'm gonna go. So I'm like, Jason, what are you doing over here? He goes, I was just going to get some game.
Oh yeah.
Like, hey, I just want to know what's going on. He goes, yeah, go down to the police office now.
It's one of the funniest quotes in this whole case. He's police guy. Anyway, yeah, so it just so happened that when all of this was going down, like when Charles was locked out of the house and took Lori's purse from her car, and all of this chaos was going on, Jason Mal just happened to be on the side of the road and met Melanie and told her to go down to the police station. And he said he was visiting Gabe, who we know lived right around the corner from the Vallows at that time. And in fact, they had just moved to that house around the corner from Gabe on January 1st. And this was in Gilbert. So, and all of this happened on, I think it was January 30th. So, yeah. All right. All right. Stephanie Wood asked, in your idiom, do you think there is any way either of them could walk free? It is my worst fear, she wrote. It's always possible. Yeah, it's always, anything is possible. I think it would take a pretty egregious misstep on the part of the prosecution, but I don't think it's probable. I personally do not think that they're going to either of them will walk away with a not guilty verdict. And that's not just like hopeful thinking or wishing. I just look at the preponderance of evidence that we've seen so far that's just come out of Arizona. And we haven't seen much of anything from Idaho. But yeah, none of these criminals were sophisticated, and then they relied on other co-conspirators who were equally as unsophisticated, like Melanie then Boudreaux, who gets a burner phone and is like, it's me, Leilani Lee. I mean, all she did was switch out the M for an L and even kept her middle name. So, and then had instructions that if Lori wanted to send her a message, or if she sent a message to Melanie's burner phone, to send a text message to her regular phone with the monkey covering its eyes emoji. So yeah, just not the sharpest text in the drawer. So I can only imagine the breadcrumb trails that they left behind. And then, like even Pryor trying to say Chad didn't know, or like Chad's kids, like, oh, he was set up, he didn't know. Like, oh, you have the remains of 2 kids in your backyard, and you never questioned, these two obvious plots that were, dug up. And yeah, so I just don't foresee, them having a moment of like, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit kind of thing. Plus, John Pryor is no Johnny Cochran. My browser took me to the most current comments. All right, I see. Lots of comments, not very many questions. So we might get out of here really early tonight. Okay. Beth Gaither asked, are they going to be able to gain access to information on all of the burner phones they had? That's a good question. I kind of doubt it. I would imagine they got rid of some of the burner phones. We may never know, but there was an interesting comment from the Dateline producer Twitter account. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. I'll just quickly share my screen. I just thought that this was so interesting. It said, I don't need to move my mic. It said police found as many as 60 untraceable phones and said the group also used approximately 30 email addresses. So this was from June 2020. Yeah, that was astounding. So I will be eager to find out if that's actually true, if police actually confiscated these 60 burner phones. So yeah, and there are notes at times that indicate, because Lori started getting more tech savvy as time wore on. And there were some text messages where they could see from the records that they secured from the different cell providers, that a text message had been sent, but they didn't have the contents of the text message. So like that was like an example of that was, I think Lori sent a text message to her niece, Melanie, on the day that Charles was shot, I'm pretty sure. And it noted that the text had been sent, but it was deleted, or they didn't have the contents. Let me see if I can find that. I see one. No. I wonder where else. Yes. Yeah, I'm finding it now. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to find those and save them. Um, Let me look one other place. That's it. No. Okay. Stop. Yeah, I'll have to look for that. Okay. Yeah, when Evil entered, made the comment, Colby said that Lori had a lot of things for prepping and asked if law enforcement found the stash. So I was there in May 2018, and Lori had a walk-in pantry, and there was no evidence of prepping. Like it looked like Costco. Like there was a lot of junk food, and there were like your typical, like plastic containers with rice, but like a normal size plastic container with like rice and cereal and things like that. But Lori wasn't even much of a cooker, so or a cook, cooker. So yeah, and he also the recording from the Dr. Phil show was deleted by the Dr. Phil show, but I was on that show with him, and Dr. Phil showed video of it was a video of Alex carrying the heavy container out of the storage unit. And Dr. Phil asked Colby what he thought um, could have been in that heavy container. And Colby made a very strange statement. He said, well, my mom um, was a prepper and, excuse me, and had, and something about like having large quantities of beans and rice. And I was glad that they didn't, like, the camera didn't cut to my face, because I caught myself like rolling my eyes, and I really did like catch myself and stop. But I was just like, okay, hold up. Like, this was a container. There weren't many containers in that storage unit. So we knew that at that point. And these would have been like 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 why would she had a 3-bedroom house. First of all, she didn't even bring like her family's photo albums. Like there was so little in that storage unit. Why on earth would she have had giant containers of beans and rice? So it was an odd statement. So, who knows? She might have picked up some prepping propensities, between the time that I visited there they moved. But yeah, I just don't. Yeah, there are question marks around that statement for me. Oh, I just saw a really good question. But I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I haven't. Beth. Yeah. Okay. No, I just answered that question. Yeah. So Crocheting Bammy asked, do you think Chad and Lori had any plans of returning to the mainland after their wedding? So I love this question because it's a big question mark for me. Like, I know that there's one account, like one of the witnesses who had been interviewed said that Chad told them that he had bought a house in Hawaii, and he was going to be writing a book, and so he was going to be in Hawaii writing a book. So it sounds like there may have been a plan at some point for them to stay in Hawaii. And I question why they came back, especially because I just can't let go of the fact that like the Jeep was picked up by police. They had a warrant. They left the warrant at someone's apartment and no one followed up. And, so I question, like, why didn't Chad and Lori just stay in Hawaii? So I wonder if there was something that Chad had to do, like with with the kids' remains or his family or something, because something brought them back and kept them hanging around. So I just, I don't know. And we don't know if behind the scenes, if there was actually like a lot of controversy that he had to kind of handle and, take care of after marrying so soon. So we're missing a lot of the backstory that might explain why they came back to Idaho and stayed until the welfare check. But yeah, so that's just a big question mark. I've also wondered if Melanie was a problem for them, because if you think about this from Melanie's perspective, Lori convinced Melanie to come out to to Idaho first for a visit. According to Melanie, she talked about this in one of her interviews. She talked about, I think this was in her East Idaho News interview. She talked about like missing her kids and she was so sad. And so Lori convinced her to come out to Idaho to visit. And then Melanie moves out. She gets there November 1st. Chad and Lori take off for their wedding, like November 4th or 3rd. So they take off for their wedding 2 days earlier. I would imagine that if they had told Melanie that they were just going to go ahead and stay, Melanie would have been really salty about that, because Melanie was also, I believe, really, really paranoid, as evidenced by her text to Brandon, that she was randomly going to move to Boise. So this was on October 14th. So she texted Brandon to say she would be moving to Boise, Idaho, with or without her kids. And this really concerned Brandon. In fact, let me just go ahead and share my screen. I think I have two. Yeah. Okay. All right. So somewhere in here, let me see if I can just search for Boise. Okay. About 2 weeks after the shooting, Melanie texted Brandon that she had decided to move to Boise, according to court documents. Melanie wrote, "The kids could remain with you in Arizona. You would have to arrange for daycare, and I could have the kids for school holidays and summers. Or I could take the kids to Idaho and enroll them in school there, and you could have the kids for school holidays and summers." Like, she thought she would just be able to negotiate this over text. Please let me know what you'd like to do. So that, and then she didn't show up for the custody hearing, which was bizarre. But and then there was a note in, I think that, yeah, this was in the Gilbert police report on October 14th. Brandon Boudreaux called me to advise Melanie contacted him and said she would be moving to Boise, Idaho next week, with or without their children. Brandon was taken back by this because Melanie never talked about Boise before, and she would never want to separate from her children. Furthermore, Melanie still had a rental agreement through July 2020 at her Gilbert residence. So she had moved in there, I think, August 1st. And I think the lease went through July. Yeah. Brandon said this was extremely unusual behavior for Melanie, especially after the recent shooting. Brandon had custody of his 4 children during our conversation and said he would be seeking legal assistance, reference the custodial arrangement, considering Melanie's sudden desire to move. On this date, data was also received from Verizon for the information requested on the search warrants. So, yeah, it was bizarre. And obviously she never had any intention of moving to Boise. She was going to be moving to Rexburg. But I think at this point, Melanie was at peak paranoia because now we are so familiar. Well, people who are going to hang out for hours on lives like this are probably pretty familiar with the story and know that police never went after her. Like, all these people who committed these crimes, like, or allegedly, they take off, and they're like looking over their shoulder, and they're behaving very erratically because they don't know what's coming next. So we have the benefit of having watched the story from like a year to 2 years later, depending on when you jumped onto this treadmill. But she was acting like someone who was just throwing any kind of encumbrance overboard. Like, this boat that she was in was sinking, and she just had to dump everything overboard and get out of town. So she did that. And I talked in another live about how she went to the kids' school and tried to pick them up early. And this was on the day that she was supposed to have the kids, but they weren't at school. And the next day, if my source is correct, she and Lori left for Hawaii. So I've questioned, and this was around. This was when Tammy actually died. So they left for Hawaii right before Tammy died. So I've questioned if Melanie's intent was to just pull a Lolo and just take off with the kids. And yeah, we may never know, or we might find out. But yeah, so but all that to say, so where am I going with this? So that was mid-October. Then she goes to Idaho. We don't know how long she was in Idaho, but she signed the lease on her apartment. I think it was October 28th, and then left with Alex on October 31st. They flew to Phoenix, packed up her house into a U-Haul, and drove to Idaho, and arrived on or around October 1st. So November 1st, sorry. So yeah, so I mean, she would have just gotten there right before, just about 48 hours before Lori and Chad left for their honeymoon. So I've also wondered if Melanie was a big reason that they felt like they had to come back. And I've also wondered if she was the reason that they stayed as long as they did, because Lori had to keep Melanie calm. If the story is what it looks like, then Lori and Chad were involved in, allegedly, reportedly, possibly, in the planning of the shooting of Brandon. Well, let's put it this way. If Lori and Chad were involved in the planning and shooting, or attempted shooting of Brandon, and Melanie was scared, which, for her to just like pick up one day and leave with or without her kids and move so far away, and just like try to make these custody agreements, over text on her way out of town, she would not have taken well to her aunt then just uprooting. So yeah, so something kept them in Idaho. So I think, quite possibly they just had a number of, pots on burners that were boiling over, and they just couldn't get away without, especially if Melanie was freaking out and was angry at the thought of them possibly just taking off and staying in Hawaii. She's erratic. It appears that she's even more erratic than Lori, and Lori's erratic. All of these women were very, very erratic, as was Chad. So Alexa, stop. So yeah, I think that would have been a really significant risk. So do you think Chad's house is really worth his defense? No, I don't. I suspect that Pryor is just doing this for the visibility at this point, and he can't be a public defender because he's not death penalty certified, or whatever that's called. So I think he's just seeing it through, but I wonder if he will do the minimum and just come in and mostly pound the table with a little bit of case law. Nora Levine asks, is it just a coincidence all the key casters were slim, blonde, and attractive? No, I don't think so. I think they all had a type. And then there was Zulema. Zulema was the odd man out. Hey. I said early in the live that my daughter will be coming with her dog, and this is Finnegan. He's saying hi. Okay. Hopefully he doesn't bark too much during the live. Okay. Does anyone know if Melanie Zulema and Melanie got excommunicated from the church? That's a big question I have. I mean, I don't think we'll probably find out, at least maybe not until the trial. But yeah, I don't know how any of them could still be members. Honey, do you want to get a seltzer? Okay. Love my puppies. Oh, that's a fitting username. Do you think one or both of them will take a plea deal at the last minute? So I've questioned that. I talked about this in other lives, but so one of them should. And if I had my druthers, it would be Lori, because I think if Lori ever accepts a plea deal, she'll just burn the whole thing down. So that would be like my kind of secret wish. That's not even secret, but I suspect that they won't turn on each other, and I don't think it has anything to do with love. I wonder if both of them have murdered before. And if they have, there's a nagging question in my mind. How did they meet on October 26th and already start planning these murders? According to the affidavit of probable cause, and I think also the indictments against Lori and Chad that have come out of Idaho, they started conspiring. Lori, Chad, and Alex started to conspire about murdering Tammy as early as October 1st, 2018. So I'm very curious as to how they got that date. And then the kids on October 26th. So that would have been the day that they met in person. So how would two people bond so quickly that they could go right to allegedly conspiring to harm the children? I don't think they used murder at that point. But ultimately, also, maybe they did. There was one I noticed when I went back over. I think it was the indictments. There was the term harm instead of murder, so that threw some question marks for me. But that's neither here nor there. They were conspiring to murder as the very month that they met, and so if that's true, then to me it just seems like they just shared this like fantasy for murder, or more realistically, I question if both of them had murdered before, and if so, and they shared any culpability they had in any other deaths, then they have a zero-sum game. Like one turning on the other would be a zero-sum game, because at this point, they're both facing the possibility of the death penalty. But if one turns on the other, and then the other one, then flips back onto, person A, and they are prosecuted for additional murders, and then the chances of at least one of them getting the death penalty, um, are pretty high. So, in my mind, if they don't turn on each other, whether this is valid or not, if they don't turn on each other, I strongly suspect it's because they know each other's secrets. Karina, I'm not sure what your question is. Do you know if Lori's tape on interview of kid's death will be released, or is her mental health the reason we won't see it? We don't even have a record that I can think of that she was interviewed by law enforcement about the kids' deaths. So I could be wrong about that, but I don't think we have a record. So, and because Idaho treats the Freedom of Information Act differently, we won't know until the trial if Lori even talked to Rob Wood at any point. So. And Noel Faint asked, at the risk of sounding totally naive, how do you keep up with all the FOIA document drops? It has to be overwhelming. Yeah, yeah, it has been overwhelming at times, and and it's not just reading them; it's reading them, taking screenshots, comparing one department's treatment of a particular document with other departments' treatment of the same document. So if I see something that I, remember having read before, then I'll start doing searches to see if, I'm going to find this particular document in triplicate. And what I'll find is that typically they handle redactions very differently. So something that is redacted by one department, like let's just say by the FBI, might be left unredacted by, let's just say, Chandler or Gilbert. And so, yeah. And then like, converting a lot of the screenshots into live text and stuff. Yeah, it's been quite the heavy lift. And when it came to the Gilbert documents, I was just so burnt out. I was just like, I can't read any more of this right now. But then there was the question of the blood in the cars, and that pulled me back in. So I did eventually read all of the documents front to, from beginning to end. So, yeah, I think it's, I don't know, you just kind of make time for, what's important. And when I finished the Gilbert documents, it was actually the last episode. I forget who it was. I think it was 2020, their Adam and Evil episode. That I've talked about this before, like in my first live that I did from A Murderous Heart. That really pushed me over the edge, where I was like, okay, I need to just start jumping into these FOIA docs and unpacking them, because that particular episode was just so full of cloying sentimentality, declaring claims as fact, like claims that Melanie Gibb made as like absolute fact. And, just quite a few, what I would say were egregious oversteps from an editorial standpoint. So, it wasn't motivated by like delusions of grandeur. It's not like I think like if you want something done right, you need to do it yourself. It wasn't that. I just felt a little more protected by being able to talk about these things because of the FOIA docs. So, yeah, that's how I do it. But I am so glad that Idaho doesn't treat FOIA docs the same, because I definitely needed a break. And I seriously doubt at this point we're going to get any more document dumps before the trial. Now, after the trial, it's on like Donkey Kong. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Gulf Coast Grandma. Okay. My daughter's being ridiculous and very distracting. Delightfully so. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to get back to where I was, because what will happen is the screen will just update and it will fast forward me to the end. So, oh gosh. At some point, I'm just going to have to start reading questions. Oh, greetings from Holland. Greetings, Lucy. Okay. Marlene asks, I understand that Idaho does not have an insanity defense. If Lori is found guilty, does she stay in prison, or could she serve her sentence in a mental hospital? I think she would, the default would be for her to go to prison. While she's in prison, she could feign another breakdown. Excuse me. I believe that this was feigned, but I mean, I have no doubt that the weight of the world is crashing down on her. Just having so much time in isolation for a super extrovert like Lori has to be quite crushing. Plus just being like the most hated mom in America when she was, like always grokked on being loved and adored and all of that. So I don't doubt that she's under duress, but there are lots of criminals who are under duress who pay the consequences of their actions. So I expect that she probably won't receive such generous treatment after she's actually convicted. So I could be wrong. Either way, ultimately, as long as she isn't free, I'm good. And even if by some tragic bye Annie, love you, by I don't know, a tragic stroke of bad luck, she is found innocent, it won't be based on insanity, because Idaho doesn't allow for that. So I think the prosecution would have to really kind of fumble the case But even if that happened, like they'll never be free, and if they're out of prison, they're probably in greater danger than they are in prison. So they'll be hounded their entire lives. But I don't think that she'll get out of prison. And I don't think that she'll live out her sentence in a mental hospital. I could be wrong, but even that it's no cakewalk. Okay. Let's see. Millie Doe asks, how are you holding up with all this? I hope you have an army behind you. Thank you. I'm holding up well. I think just having some distance from this has helped tremendously. So yeah, and at some point you have to find your own sources of happiness. Otherwise the Lori and Chad take even more victims. So Love My Puppies asks, how are so many walking away from these deaths with no responsibility? That's a great question. I wish I knew. It's absolutely infuriating. I just think that at this point, it is taking all of their resources to go after Lori and Chad, and even some of these peripheral, highly questionable deaths, like my brother Joe, Eldon Clausen. I just think that they're, I would love to be pleasantly surprised, but there just doesn't seem to be an appetite for going after these people. I mean, even Melanie Van Boudreaux, in the attempted shooting of her, estranged husband, Brandon, according to Brandon, she was one of only a few people who knew where he lived. So it's reminiscent of when Joe was tased by Alex. They had just shared the location of where they were going to do the supervised visit. I think it was like less than 48 hours before the visit, if memory serves me. So, Lori was the only one who knew where Lori and Joe were the only ones who knew where this visitation was going to take place. And lo and behold, Alex is there. So how wasn't Lori like investigated? How wasn't she charged? It's the same with Melanie. I mean, one of the police reports even notes that Melanie was lying. I think this was to the FBI. Let me see if I can find this. That they knew that Melanie was lying, but that they weren't going after her because Ian was cooperating with authorities. Well, at that point, he wasn't. And so at the point that this comment was made, he was no longer cooperating with authorities, according to Ian. So yeah, it's let me see if I can find that, because it was just bizarre. Yeah, I found it. I will share my screen. Oh, I was still sharing my screen. Okay. Okay, this was December 23rd. Detective McDermott contacted Colby and obtained the story for how he came into possession of the Nissan. This was Lori's Nissan. In response to questions, Colby did not believe the blood in the Nissan came from his family. Colby and his family provided voluntary think this is pronounced buccal swabs, for exclusion with future DNA analysis. During their contact, Colby also revealed that JJ previously had a service dog. Okay, let me see if I can skip ahead. Oh, Melanie was interviewed again by the FBI in Idaho. So this was on the same day. Melanie was dishonest about facts and then something redacted, which anything in a context like this, I just think is very interesting. Melanie did not provide any additional leads or investigative information. Melanie was not challenged on her lies because Ian was present and still cooperating with law enforcement. But according to Ian, he had stopped cooperating with law enforcement. It was when Alex died. Yeah. So according to him, let me see if I can find this. The 19th. Yeah. So let me just share my screen. All right. Ian says, okay, let me back up a little bit. Ian's ex-wife contacted him and expressed her concerns according to court documents. She said she was going to meet with police and Ian agreed to go with her. What I shared with police were the ideas that Chad, Lori, and Alex may have planned shooting at Brandon and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger if Melanie's fears have any validity, Ian allegedly wrote. If shooting at Brandon was indeed based on the idea that he was no longer actually Brandon and needed to die as part of the Lord's plan, then the kids' lives could be forfeited based on the idea that they're not really Tylee and JJ anymore. Ian shared other details, said he would cooperate with police and allowed them to pull data from his phone. He met with officers the next day and they gave him a recording device to put on his keychain. My plan was to record anything I thought could help locate Tylee and JJ, locate Chad and Lori, and understand what happened when Brandon was shot at, Ian wrote. If I thought Chad and Lori were going to be calling, I'd turn on the recorder and just let it run until they'd hung up. Ian says nothing substantial was ever recorded with Chad and Lori because they never talked about the missing children. On December 19th, so this is one week after Alex died. Is that right? Yeah. On December 19th, police searched Alex Cox's Rexburg townhouse, and Ian says he admitted to Melanie that he had spoken with officers. Now, there's actually a little bit more of a backstory that we found out on Dateline. I think it was Dateline, that he said that they came to him and asked him to let him into the apartment, and he said that they left the search warrant on the counter, and when he read it he thought, oh, this just doesn't he took issue with it. And supposedly that day, and this is confirmed in here, on December 19th, police searched Alex Cox's Rexburg townhouse. So they circled back for a second search, and this time they did some forensic testing. And Ian says he admitted to Melanie that he had spoken with officers. I didn't know how she would react, but I couldn't hang on to the stress anymore. Of course, she was hurt, feeling betrayed, but she reassured me that she loves me and she understands why I did it, Ian allegedly wrote. So that was December 19th. And this document, this interview that they according to this document, and I think this was the Gilbert police report, in this interview that they did with Melanie, 4 days later, it says Melanie wasn't challenged on her lies because Ian was present and still cooperating with law enforcement. So, yeah, I think she just wasn't challenged on her lies. I mean, unless there's like some really weird plan that Ian had, but I don't think there was. I strongly suspect that once the danger was addressed, the danger to him and to his kids, he really just didn't care anymore. And in fact, made a statement on Deadline, on Dateline. Let me see if I can find it. This is, as a family member, this was his most damning statement, in my opinion. Uh, I don't, it looks like I don't have it, but he made this statement that this just wasn't all the hype that people were making it out to be. And then the kids' remains were found just weeks later. So, oh, I do have it on, I, let me see, in the dashboard. So I'm going to pull it up quickly. Now I have all of the deleted episodes of Dateline, so I need to go and get this. Okay, this was at the all right, I'm just pulling it up here, running a search. Okay, I found it. So let me share my screen. So, okay, so Melanie said, yeah, getting married really quick. They're working on us. Well, let me go back. Okay. Keith Morrison. Here he was sitting with the woman he had just married, the woman he said he was in love with, telling us he did not tell her for 2 weeks that he was spying on her for the FBI. How did you find out? So he asked that of Melanie. He told me, and you're in shock. Like, why didn't you come to me? I want to help. Oh yeah, we all know how much you want to help. So Keith said the whole point was not to come to you. And Melanie said, sure, sure. And then Keith said, they wanted to know your unguarded thoughts. And Melanie said, yeah, getting married really quick. They're working on us. It's already hard enough. So she's already playing the pity card. And we're hanging on by a thread. And I had to look at the intent of, acting out of fear. And he was just trying to do the right thing, but confused and thrown in this mess. And I didn't have anything to hide. And so, okay, record my conversations. I'm okay with that. Keith said, yeah. And they said, and then Ian said, then she forgave, and I'm moving forward on supporting her. Keith asked, are you still cooperating with the FBI? Ian said, Not actively. I mean, any questions they have, we'll answer through the lawyers, obviously. I opened up to Melanie because I'm starting to see her perspective, see that this isn't all the hype it's being made up to be. So this was May 2020, and the kids' remains were found the following month. But so he, like, according to him, he came clean to Melanie the day that they served the search warrant and searched Alex's apartment. So again, it's just like, I don't know why they said that, well, we didn't challenge her because Ian was cooperating. I think it just appears like both of the Melanies are just getting a pass. And with Melanie Gibb, law enforcement has been, in my opinion, actively protecting her in these FOIA docs, to the point of when they said who the members of this group were, they did not even include Melanie in the list. Like, they included Summer, but they didn't include Melanie Gibb. Let me see if I can find that. And I was just, and then there was another, well, let me see. See if I can find that one. All right. I'm trying to zoom in for those of you on mobile devices. Okay. Share my screen. Oops. There we go. Using these interviews and the data gathered from the above mentioned warrants, several others shared Lori and Chad's belief system were identified. Those pertinent to the investigation were identified as Melanie, and that was Boudreaux, Alex Cox, Zulema. I don't even know why they redact her last name. Summer Shiflett, Lori Vallow, and Chad Daybell. Where's Melanie Gibb? Like, that to me is just crazy that she wasn't even included on the list. So it could have been an oversight, but they also say in these documents, so these documents came out in 2021. We found out in 2020 that Melanie did lie and say that she had JJ, but that she had sent him back. And it wasn't until August 2020 in Chad's preliminary hearing that we found out that she had lied. And so we all thought, we're led to believe that Melanie, that Lori, both Lori and Chad had asked her to lie for them, but she refused. And but then, let me see. Yeah, here it is. Let me see. Yeah. So this is a year later, and that these were released. And it says, during a conference call, I learned Melanie Gibb hired an attorney and spoke briefly with Rexburg police. So remember her whole quote to Ian, oh my gosh, to Nate Eaton, that why would she need to hire an attorney because God is on her side? Well, and she released a statement in February 2020 that she, through another source, that Lori and Chad had asked her to lie and she refused, and that she had hired an attorney and was cooperating with investigators or with the investigation, something to that effect. But okay, so Melanie said the last time she saw JJ was on 9/23. Now, this also doesn't gel with the testimony that both she and David gave in the preliminary hearing, where yeah, they came downstairs, like they were getting ready. They came downstairs and JJ was gone. And supposedly David asked Lori where he was and demanded to see him. So there are all kinds of issues with Melanie Gibbs' claims. But Melanie said the last time she saw JJ was, well, you know, if my redaction is correct, always that caveat, was on 9/23/2019 when she visited Lori in Rexburg. Lori asked Melanie to take JJ with her, but Melanie declined. That's one of the most infuriating statements in all of these FOIA docs. Melanie then returned to Utah with her boyfriend, David Warwick. On 11/26, Melanie received a call from Lori and Chad. They requested Melanie to say JJ was with her if anyone asked. Melanie refused. Melanie was adamant with Rexburg police that she did not know where JJ was located. They also, in the FOIA docs, it said that she told them that she didn't want to get involved. Well, too late for that. But yeah, so this statement here, Melanie refused. I mean, this is stated as a fact. Like, it's not even like, you know, Melanie claimed that she refused. There's no like updated notes, and I don't know what protocol is like, but they would have known, because this was I'm pretty sure this came from Gilbert, and they knew that she lied. So because she was talking to Ryan, I think his last name is Pillar, with Gilbert police. And so this is very problematic for me. And then there was another page, I talked about this in, yeah, and also even in the affidavit of probable cause for Rexburg police, that came out in, like, I think February 2020, it said Melanie informed RPD that she declined Chad's and Lori's requests to lie. But yeah, there was something else. I'll see if I can find it. Let me see. It was in reference to let me search for one more thing. It was an entire page. I think I found it. Okay, yeah, I'll share my screen again. This was an entire page from the, I think it was the Chandler police report, where Melanie's name fit in all of these redactions, but it was her last name. And she is, to my recollection, she is the only one who like is ever referred to by her last name. And some people have said, oh, well, that's to like avoid confusion with Melanie then Boudreaux. Like, Melanie Pulaski is always referred to as Melanie Boudreaux in all these documents because she was Melanie Boudreaux at the time of these crimes. Jeanette, I just saw your note that my screen was being shared. But here they are referring to Melanie as Gibb, and then they're not including her first name here, or here. So that makes it much more difficult to search these documents for every instance of Melanie's name. And this is pretty consistent throughout the documents. You also see it, sometimes as Melanie and then her last name redacted. But it wasn't until I actually read through the documents, I had seen enough instances where the only thing that fit in the redaction was and made sense in the context of the sentence was Gibb. And I'm like, what is up with that? And then when I found it on this one page repeatedly, I just think that is very, I don't know. Because it's not the norm, and because there are other indications that law enforcement is protecting Melanie Gibb, and I suspect it's to try to retain any credibility in her testimony because she is a key witness, and will be a key witness. But really, I mean, she is going to be absolutely shredded on cross. But in my opinion, the only thing that she really brings to the table, unless she's cooperated in ways that we don't know about and has other compelling information, and they need her to be a Girl Scout. But I mean, that ship has already sailed. Like, if they wanted that, they probably should have given her also a limited use immunity agreement and thrown a gag order at her. But she doesn't need to be a Girl Scout for the main things in that recorded call with Chad and Lori to stand any test of scrutiny, because it was Chad's voice contradicting his claim of how Tammy died. And it was Lori's voice saying not even Al knew where JJ was. And those two details, in my opinion, are going to be very detrimental to their defense. And it doesn't matter how skeevy Melanie Gibb is, she still got that on recording. So I think, yeah, I mean, it could be oversights, but it does seem like, especially in not including her in the list of believers. I mean, come on, July 9th, 2 days before Charles was shot and killed, Melanie sat outside Lori's house in her car like a creeper until Lori let her back because she wanted to be on the front row. She called Lori mom. She had another name. She was given another name. She went by that name. She used I believe a burner phone where she was called that name. And so it was what was it? Like Penelope or something. No. Yeah, I can't think of her given name now, but anyway, yeah. I think Melanie Pulaski was Miriam, and I can't think of what Melanie Gibb was now, but yeah. So I don't know what's up with that. Okay, we'll take a few more questions. Just looking for questions. Jean Panic, I'm not sure, asked, why would Chad and Alex bury the kids in Chad's backyard when they are surrounded by woods? That is the question of the hour. I mean, I just think it speaks to, and of course, they allegedly buried the kids in Chad's backyard. I think it speaks to their lack of sophistication, his laziness, Chad's laziness, and Chad's hubris. I I don't know if going into the backyard was like exciting for him, knowing what was back there. I don't know if he thought like burying them in his yard would give him the most control, like being able to kind of watch over things. I just don't know, but I mean, it was risky, especially since Tammy was alive when both of the kids were allegedly buried in on his property. So it's it's mystifying. I mean, I thought for sure at least Tylee was in Yellowstone, especially with them going to Yellowstone the day before. I was absolutely shocked. Yeah, that hundreds of square miles of open land to choose from, and yeah, I am grateful though, because when there was that false sighting of Tylee, I just thought like this is never going to end. People are just going to keep coming forward, even though I told that person, like, this person you're describing, it wasn't Tylee. Like, nothing about her description fit Tylee personality wise. I mean, the whole story was really just not believable. And the FBI, I told her to, report it to the FBI, and they didn't find it credible. Like, they, chased it down. But anyway, of course the media picked it up anyway. And then it was just, I just remember after that, just thinking, like, if these kids' remains aren't found, because I never believed that the kids were alive, but I just thought this isn't ever going to stop. I mean, even just people wanting their 15 minutes of fame. Nora Levine asked, is it possible there are secret believers amongst the law enforcers involved in this case? Possibly, but I personally, again, I might be a little one against the wind on this. I personally don't think that Arizona was as, in my opinion, negligent as they were, because this group had influence. I strongly suspect that they had probably just gotten so used to cutting corners with cases and just like, wrapping things up. And I know as an analyst, sometimes if organizations or, governing bodies, if they monitor the wrong metrics, it can result in the wrong behavior. So, for example, if one of their key performance indicators, so that's a term that's used among analysts, or shortened to KPI, if one of their KPIs was like how quickly they wrapped up cases, let's just say, like maybe their tracking the time it takes to, open and close a case as some kind of measure of efficiency, then you could have departments cutting corners to try to like get their numbers up, to close up cases faster than they should. We don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but so I doubt that this was the first case where, in my opinion, very egregious missteps caused these criminals to be able to just move on to their next crime. But I suspect there were probably quite a few cases before it that, like it's almost like here in the city, restaurants will just get surprise visits from inspectors, and they are graded on these inspections. And then there is a notice put on their window of what their grade is. And so if you go up to a restaurant and their grade is, C, then you're just going to keep going. You're going to go to a restaurant that has like, an A rating. And so, but it's kind of similar. It's like, well, yeah, if they had known the inspectors were coming that particular day, they probably would have swept up a little better, looked for, mouse droppings, and things like that. And so it's kind of like that with this case. I think they just thought like, all right, let's just wrap this up and, let's just move on. And clearly this woman was being harassed and, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah. And so I think that especially the case against Lori in the conspiracy of Charles Vallow's murder is going to cast a very penetrating light on Chandler's practices. And I think it's going to make it harder for the prosecution to win that case because, any defense attorney worth their weight in gold is going to pick apart all of these cut corners. So, all right. Vivian asked if I would ever consider getting a Patreon account. I appreciate, the offers, but no, I mean, like, people have asked for my Patreon account to contribute. No, I wouldn't. Yeah. And this is a labor of love for me. I don't say that in a self-aggrandizing way, but yeah, I'm not looking to benefit. Okay, so Kathy S. I think what she's doing is defining an accessory to murder. Any person who knew, aided, lied, helped, hid information before a homicide as well as after. So yeah, you can be an accessory before the fact or an accessory after the fact. Then she asks, Annie, just how many names of this weirdo cult mess would you put on that list? Yeah. Well, according to these FOIA docs, and again, if I understand the definition of accessory to murder, and this is just my opinion, I would put Melanie, at minimum, Melanie, Zulema, Summer, possibly Janice Cox, I thought it was interesting that in one of the FOIA docs, it actually noted that the only two people Melanie talked to, I think it was like after the attempted shooting of Brandon, maybe, were Lori and Janice. Yeah, it possibly Jason Mao. I don't know how much he was involved because he's just such a sniveling coward who was passive aggressive and was posting these social media um, posts that seemed to be hat tips to some of these crimes. And yeah, it was, but so it's hard to know how much his behavior fit into the definition of accessory. And he also didn't, as far as we know, he didn't put much in writing. But let me see. Yeah, I found it. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Melanie confronted Brandon about her suspicions in June 2019 while on a family trip. We talked about that in another live. They were on vacation visiting her father and stepmother and staying in their home. And that's when she told him that she wanted a divorce. And then they called her dad down into the basement where they were staying. So he's like, oh, it sounded like a fabulous family vacation. But Brandon was adamant that he was not homosexual or used drugs. That should say, or that he used drugs. Brandon told Melanie she was crazy and suggested she seek a mental evaluation. Melanie told me she knew she was not crazy and knew the truth. As a result of Melanie's suspicions, she primarily communicated with Brandon via text message and maintained as little contact as possible. Excuse me. Brandon and Melanie filed for divorce in July 2019, so that was a month later. Melanie told me since their divorce, Brandon had turned church members and her own family against her. Melanie said a lot of people believed what Brandon said about her, so she learned to stay independent. I mean, this was, I'm pretty sure, after Brandon was shot at. The people she now primarily talked with was her grandmother, Janice Cox, and Aunt Lori Vallow. So that, for me, and especially with some of the references to Janice Cox in the affidavit of probable cause that came out of Arizona, like we know that she was running interference for Lori. She picked up Adam at the airport and was feeding information to Lori about like Adam's whereabouts. And so we don't know how much she was involved in all of this, but potentially she could potentially be an accessory. Yeah, I'm sure there are more, but those are top the list for me. Trying to think if there's anyone else. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Jeanette. Sorry. Okay. So the question is, do you have any verification of the alleged pool party on the date of Charles' death? Who attended? So we don't know who attended, and I think everyone who was there, the only one we know of was Colby. He claims that he only came because his mom told him that Charles had a heart attack, and he didn't find out that he was shot um, until uh, until he got there. I do not find this claim credible, but you know, who knows? But so he's the only one we know was at the pool party. However, I was in the Facebook group where the landlord had come in and shared this bombshell. And I'll just share the whole thing because maybe there are people who are newer to the case who weren't aware of this. But he said, I've known Lori and Charles since they moved to Chandler many years ago. We rented them the first home they lived in for around 5 years before moving to Kauai. I'd say we were good friends. My family visited them, Charles, Lori, Tylee, and JJ in Kauai. When they returned to Chandler, Charles and I had several conversations during Lori's disappearance, February 2019. One thing to note here is that Colby didn't move with them to Kauai. He was emancipated and then stayed in Arizona. Okay. He, meaning Charles, came to my house and cried, telling me he's so sad and that he can't believe she just abandoned JJ. A few text messages followed, and then they resurfaced as Charles tried to make the marriage work. We then rented Charles and Lori another home in June 2019, where Charles was murdered July 11th. Now, Charles had his name on it and he was paying for it, but he never intended to move in there. They only lived together for a short period of time, but he may have given Joe the impression that he was also going to move in. I don't know. But Charles and I were texting the night before on July 10th at 7:49 p.m. and planning to meet in the morning to find him another place to live because it wasn't working out with Lori. That was the morning he was shot. Many very weird events followed. When the neighbors informed me police were at the house and yellow tape surrounded, I immediately texted both Charles and Lori, "Are you okay?" No response until around 11 a.m. and Lori replied, "We're okay. I'll explain later." She and Alex were taken to Chandler PD for questioning and released. That day, the neighbors reported a pool party at the house. Now, keep in mind, they had only lived there for like a few weeks. So they didn't know who this family was. And then there's this shooting and there's yellow tape everywhere. And this is like a nice neighborhood in the burbs. So, this went around the community, like, yeah, very quickly. Word like this spreads very quickly. So the neighbors would have all been chatting, texting, and then they note that this is the same day and there was a pool party at the house that Charles was murdered, with loud music and lots of people swimming. Neighbors also reported Alex was staying at the house for several days following the shooting, even though he lived in the same area. I spoke with Lori several times days following the shooting, and she never sounded shocked, sad, or heartbroken, as you would think a bride would be watching her husband die. I asked her to move out, which she did August 31st. No communication as to where she was going. I really like Charles and miss his smile and Louisiana, Texas twang accent. He was generous and a family man. Such a terrible loss. I'm so sorry he's gone. I wish I could have helped him more sooner. R.I.P. my friend. So that that was one account. And let me see if I can find, if I have the video of, let's see. Okay, yeah. There was a girl who lived next, or young woman who had lived next door to them, who was in high school at the time, and she was interviewed by a podcaster. I forget his name, and I will play this. Let me make sure. Yep. I checked.
The morning it happened, we woke up. I woke up, it was a break from school, so I woke up at noon-ish, and I turned on the TV, and I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? That's my house on the news. What? So I figured out the story, everything, and then later that night, I remember going outside in my backyard to let my dog out or something, and all of a sudden I just hear like music playing, people splashing in the pool. I was like, what the heck? I totally did not report it though, because I don't know, I told my parents, I was like, do you hear what's going on over there? But yeah.
So that was the night that Charles Vallow was shot, and all the fire trucks and ambulances and everything were here. They were in the backyard having a party, huh?
Yeah.
So
unfortunately.
Okay.
Sophomore.
So, this is two different people reporting the same thing, that there was a pool party. And then, Colby also verified that he was over there, but he said if he had known that Charles was shot, he wouldn't have gone. So who knows? I do hope that the grand jury chased this gopher down its hole. Okay, Sandra Vion asked, why do you think Lori and Chad talked on a recorded line the day the kids were found? I think that Chad was just freaking it out and pooping his pants. And excuse me, I think in my opinion, his call, his demeanor, the dichotomy of the the difference in their demeanors. Like Lori was calm, cool, collected. Chad was freaking out. They were talking in code and he was kind of mumbling. But to me, it showed that Lori was much more the one who was the leader. Now, I think that, there wasn't a ringleader per se. I think that their evil just worked for each other. And so I think that they were both the ringleaders and they had lots and lots of support from, these group members. But excuse me. Yeah, I think he was just freaking out and he needed to give her a heads up that it was about to go down, that their goose was cooked. And so yeah, and it also speaks to his lack of criminal sophistication, because that was very telling. Like if you had nothing to hide and investigators, like a team of law enforcement showed up at my house and started digging up my yard and I had nothing to hide, I would go full Karen. Like there's not much you can do, but I'd be like, you're going to pay for this, like this is crazy. Like I'd be so incensed. Like what is going on? And Chad wasn't. He had his tail between his legs. He was a scared little boy. Now he shows up at these hearings, looking like Lurch, but and like a hardened criminal, except when his angry daddy makes him sit up straight with his hands on the table, which is hilarious. But yeah, Yeah, I think he was just freaking out so badly that it was worth the risk. Denny Lenny asked, "Is it possible that Chad is using Tammy's life insurance money to pay his lawyer?" I would imagine they froze his assets. Yeah, I no, and he had gone through most of that life insurance money. So yeah, it was crazy. I forget the numbers now, but I just I know that Annie Southam, she's uh, an admin in the Cool Cats group, but she actually itemized like estimates of his expenditures, like buying the weird, what is it, a gold Cadillac, and all of these different things. He flew his kids out to California for a vacation over Thanksgiving. This is when they were on the run, and I'm sure like they were just like shelling out all of this money. We don't know how much Lori was giving Colby, but we know that there were more than 50 Venmo transactions over the course of like 2019 from either Lori or Tylee to Colby. We don't know the amounts, but I just wonder how much they were just like shelling out money, just trying to keep everyone calm and happy, like with gifts and stuff like that. But by the end, Chad had very little money left. Okay. Connie asked, "How angry are you with the police? Charles ending up dead, and Lori and Alex were allowed to murder your niece." I mean, very angry. At some point, like you can't let the anger just like destroy you. So I've talked, pretty candidly about, what 2020 was like for me, like the year 2020. And, I would wake up in the middle of the night, just like mid rage. So it's like my mind was raging and trying to figure things out in my sleep, and so it was it was causing quite a dent in like my perspective, my outlook. I was really losing a lot of the kind of joie de vivre, or whatever, joy of living. So I had to take steps to start like getting some of that back, because eventually I was like, if I lose my mental health, like I can't continue to advocate for Tylee, and it's just no way to live. And also I was being like hounded by all these trolls and stuff. And so, after a while you feel like cornered. I was also being stalked, like stupid stuff, like flowers being sent to my apartment anonymously, I guess, just to let me know they knew where I lived. And, so, so I am angry. I do feel like these law enforcement agencies in Arizona have blood on their hands. I hope that reforms come from this, and that someone else's family member could possibly be spared by those reforms, because they need to happen. Like these law enforcement agencies in the Phoenix area, I think they need to be investigated. There needs to be training that like males can be victims of domestic violence. I think there are just a host of issues. The fact that, Phoenix won't open an investigation into Joe's death is just beyond ridiculous to me. I mean, I think any peripheral deaths around this case should be investigated. There's certainly precedent for that, where you see that in true crime cases where, where, a lot of times, like, either a spouse, whether a woman or a man, like their spouse or their lover dies, and then they get remarried, and then that spouse dies, and then maybe someone else dies, or maybe it's just there's another death, and then they go back and investigate the first death, and they'll exhume bodies, they'll pull samples that were saved, and pull like records and stuff. So it's not beyond the pale to investigate a death that was originally ruled as natural, after finding a pattern. And they're not doing that, like their hubris is really stunning. And I think it's going to be a dark mark for these different agencies. And it's just a matter of time before, some investigative journalist really digs into this, like Vanity Fair. I think their stuff is really top shelf. And the thing that I really love about Vanity Fair is they will investigate law enforcement, whereas a lot of the other media outlets, they need to retain, like, contacts and people they can interview, people they can get information, on the DL and stuff. And so they're a little more reluctant to burn those bridges. And Vanity Fair will just come in and like burn all the bridges. And so anytime when I did watch true crime, Vanity Fair was my favorite. But anyway, okay, I will answer one more question. Karen Erickson. Yeah. Oh, she said this account should be monetized already. Oh, but that reminded me, people have said that they contributed to my, like the petition, but there's something going on change.org where I think on that page there is they probably have some kind of call to action to contribute, but it doesn't go to me, and it doesn't go like to Joe or anything like that. So I don't know, I haven't looked into it to see like what made people think that they were contributing. But yeah, just be careful. There is no call to action from me to contribute to anything in that, in the petition. Do I address this one? Okay, I will answer this question, but I'm not going to then end on this question. Melly Doe asked, do you think Colby knows way more than we think? Yes. Yes, I do. And part of the reason for that, and I don't say that to just like cast aspersions at him. One of the things that I knew from visiting in May 2019 was Lori had told me that Colby, that Kelsey moved in with them after Kelsey and Colby got married. So they got married, and then they were living with Charles and Lori. And she said that they had moved out right before I got there. So I got there in mid-May. So I didn't ask, like, oh, exactly when did they move out? But she had made the point that Charles told Colby, you guys need to go start your lives, and that there was tension between Lori and Kelsey. But that would have meant that Colby and Kelsey were there when Joe was found dead and when Lori took off for Hawaii. And going back to my point about, Lori doesn't have an internal editor. I mean, we'll probably never know, unless never mind. But yeah, I think on a number of fronts, I think Colby knows a lot more. I think, he's been trying to distance himself from it. And I'm sure the last Gilbert police report being released in the FOIA document dump had to have been very upsetting for him. We didn't get everything. Like, we don't have the recordings of their interviews with him. We only have their very cursory notes. So they have held back like family members recording. Same with Summer. We don't have the recording of their interview with her. Same with Melanie Gibb. But that we do for when like Rexburg police came and interviewed her, but that was like in 2021. So yeah, I think he knows a lot more. All right. So I don't want to end on that note though. And I can't reiterate enough. I know that it probably sounds disingenuous, and I know that some people it really expect me to like hold back details about Colby or like family members. But I decided early on I was either going to cover the FOIA docs or I wasn't, like I just don't feel comfortable like just, deciding who, like which details I hold back and which ones I share. So, but I honestly do not mean Colby or Kelsey any malice. Like, people may not believe that, but that is not my intent. And I really, really hope that Colby, and Kelsey, that they get the help that they need to process all of this, because at minimum, and I talked about this in the live that I did about Colby's involvement. Like Lori was weaponizing their poverty. I mean, for a mother to do that is beyond cruel, so it's like, Lori was giving them money, but everything has a hook, and so I think, it, yeah, yeah, I'm sure if he could go back, he would do things very differently, but yeah. Norla Vine asked, were Lori and Chad prepping to live the good life without the encumbrance of spouses and young children via insurance windfalls? That's what I believe. I think this all came down to they just wanted to, be able to move on with their life, their new life together without any responsibilities, without anyone, causing them problems, like a snarky teenager, or, a son with, or stepson with special needs. And, both of them endured a very significant amount of trauma in their last year plus of life. So Lori would have been dealing with all of that. And so I think they just wanted to move on with their life together while being able to live in the good of these insurance policies, and so I think Lori thought that by moving to Houston, according to Melanie Gibb, she told Nate Eaton that that Lori said, I think she told Nate that that Lori told her that Melanie asked Lori, well, why are you moving to Houston if you are getting divorced? And according to Melanie, Lori told her it was to put Charles' finances in order or something like that. So clearly Melanie knew Lori was not moving there to reunite with Charles. They all knew. I believe they all knew the plan. But yeah, so I think Lori was arrogant enough to really think that by going to Houston and that was enough to ensure that Charles would make her the beneficiary. But and then when that didn't work out, then he amped up Tammy's life insurance policy, and they were going to live off of that. But so, all right. Okay. Well, thank you, Mom DePlume. I appreciate that. But on that note, we are going to call it a night. Thank you for coming with excellent questions, and we will meet again next Friday at this time, so 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay. All right. Good night.